Hello there, and welcome to the Earth Dive, where the silence speaks louder than words, and the whispers of ancient skies drift gently through the dark tonight. We sink beneath the surface of time, not to explore what we know, but what we once felt. What if Earth once knew a second sky and let it go? Not with grief, not with fire, but with the quiet patience of stone remembering rain. There are silences older than oceans, stories the crust swallowed before bone ever learned to whisper. And among them, drifting just beyond memory's edge, was a moon that never got a name. It circled once, pale as breath on glass, closer than tides. So near, it brushed the clouds with its shadow, but time does not keep what it does not need. And Earth, in its slow dreaming, released it, not into darkness, but into dust. Wherever you are tonight, in your bed, your couch, your quiet corner of the world, I'm glad you're here. Lean into the stillness. Let your eyes soften. Let your thoughts sink like pebbles in deep water. Because this is not a story to solve. It is a lullaby the planet hums to itself, about a moon it once held, and how, for a little while, the night was double. The twin shadows. Long before names were given to stars, before fire was tamed or language shaped from breath, the night belonged to two moons, not rivals, not lovers, simply companions in a sky still learning its shape. The larger one, cool, cratered, patient, had just settled into its rhythm, pulled from Earth's side in a cataclysm so vast it melted the world anew. But the smaller one was different. It formed quietly from the same debris ring, from the same shattered dream of planet and impactor. It coalesced in the shadow of its sibling, a shy presence made of dust and time. Pale as a thought half-formed, close enough that its gravity brushed the upper winds, close enough that its light did not fall. It pooled. Nights then were not dark but layered. The first moon cast silver, the second, a soft grey luminescence, like the inside of a seashell held to the ear. Together, they painted the young Earth in gradients of shadow no eye would see for another billion years. There were no oceans yet, not as we know them, only steaming basins of hot water, restless and thin, lapping at shores of black glass. But the moons pulled anyway. Their tides were not of water, but of vapour, of magma, of atmosphere thick with the breath of a planet still cooling. The twin gravities wove a lattice of force across the surface, gentle but persistent, like fingers combing through hair. The Earth turned slowly beneath them, its days long as seasons, its nights stretched into deep, humming silence. In that silence, something like memory began, not in flesh, but in stone. The crust learned the rhythm. It expanded. It contracted. It stored the pulse of double orbit in its very bones. Time did not measure these eons. Time simply thickened, like resin dripping from a tree that had not yet evolved. Millennia became indistinguishable from moments. And in that blur, the two moons circled, one steady, one fleeting, one destined to be remembered, the other to become a sigh in the geologic record. No one called it anything. It had no name. But if it had, if a voice had risen from the magma seas to speak it, that name might have meant the one who watches without being seen, or the light that asks nothing in return, or simply, almost, because it was almost enough. Almost permanent, almost visible to the creatures that would one day look up and wonder why the night feels so empty, even when full. But what the sky held, the sky also released. Gravity is not cruel. It is only honest, and honesty, in the language of orbits, means letting go when balance shifts. The smaller moon never fought its fate. It simply orbited until it didn't. But that is a story for later. For now, let the image linger. A young Earth, wrapped in steam and starlight, cradled beneath two pale discs in the velvet dark. A moment so brief, so tender, that even the rocks forgot to record it clearly. And yet, somewhere, in the tilt of the moon's axis, in the quiet bulge on its hidden face, in the way certain tides still pull in rhythms no model fully explains, the echo remains, not as fact, but as feeling. As if the planet, in its deepest sleep, still dreams of being watched by two skies at once. The second moon did not scream as it fell. It did not burn. It did not shatter like glass against stone. It simply ceased to be separate. Its orbit, once a clean ellipse began to tremble, not with violence but with fatigue. The larger moon, now the dominant presence, tugged gently, relentlessly at its smaller sibling, not to destroy, but to reunite. Gravity, in its ancient wisdom, does not erase. It folds, it dissolves, it returns what was scattered back into the whole. And so, over millions of years, the smaller moon drifted inward, not in a rush, but in a sigh. Each revolution grew tighter. Each night its light grew brighter, sharper, as if it were trying to say something before it vanished. There were no witnesses, no eyes, no hands raised to the sky in awe or fear. Only wind, still thick with sulfur, and the slow churn of primordial seas. Only the earth itself turning beneath the double glow, its surface still molten in places, its crust thin as eggshell, breathing in the rhythm of twin tides. The smaller moon's gravity tugged at the ocean's edges, pulling them not just up and down, but sideways, creating swirls no current could replicate, eddies that carved patterns into the first sediments, patterns still faintly visible in the oldest rocks of Greenland and Australia. These are not myths, they are scars, quiet ones, hidden beneath layers of time, beneath mountains that had not yet risen, beneath ice that had not yet come. And still, the smaller moon did not cry out. It did not beg to be saved, it simply became part of the silence. When it finally crossed the Roche limit, when tidal forces stretched it thin as a breath held too long, it did not explode. It unraveled, its fragments, not as rubble, but as mist, as dust, as frozen vapor, spiraled downward in slow, spiraling veils. They did not crash. They settled. They settled into the far side of the larger moon, into its ancient highlands, into the cracks of basalt that had not yet cooled. There, in the deep, silent craters, where no sunlight ever dances, the dust accumulated, not as debris, but as memory. And so, the moon we see today, our one, our steady, our silent companion, is not whole. It is stitched, its far side so different from the near, so heavily cratered, so strangely thick, so oddly quiet, is not the result of random bombardment. It is the tomb of another moon, not a graveyard of rock, a cradle of absence. The lunar highlands are not scars, they are sutures. The moon does not speak. But if it could, it would whisper not of impacts or collisions, but of companionship, of how it once shared the sky with a sister who was smaller, quieter, and more tender. How that sister gave up her orbit so the Earth could learn to sleep. How she became not lost, but folded into the curve of its face, into the hollows where no astronaut has ever walked, where no telescope has ever fully seen. Perhaps that is why, when we look at the moon now, we feel something we cannot name, a quiet ache, a sense that the night is not complete. It is not because we are alone, it is because we once were not, and the Earth remembers. It remembers the weight of two lights, the way the darkness used to breathe differently, the way the tides used to sing in harmony, not in echo. It remembers the moon that asked for nothing, that simply stayed until it didn't. And still, in the quietest hours, when the wind dies, when the world exhales, when even the stars pause to listen, the Earth still turns, beneath a sky that feels too wide, too empty, too silent, as if it is, waiting, not for a moon to return, but for us to remember that it once did, and that perhaps is the deepest kind of loss, not the one that roars, but the one that fades like mist over a lake at dawn, one that leaves behind only the shape of its absence, like a handprint in ash, like a lullaby sung in a language no one remembers, like the breath of a moon that never had a name. There were no songs then, no voices, no prayers whispered into the dark, but there was rhythm, and rhythm, in the absence of language, becomes the only prayer. The two moons moved in a dance older than time's first heartbeat, one, slow and solemn, circling every 28 nights like a tide drawn by fate. The other, quicker, every 14, every 10, every 7. It is impossible to say, for clocks had not yet been carved from bone or stone, but the rhythm was there. In the swell of the first oceans, in the way the wind curled over the volcanic plains, in the slow pulse of the planet's core, still glowing like embers beneath a skin of cooling rock. Life had not yet learned to stir, but the Earth was learning to dream. And dreams, even those without minds to hold them, leave traces. In the deepest layers of the mantle, in the isotopic fingerprints of ancient lunar rock, scientists have found anomalies. tiny, almost invisible shifts in oxygen and titanium ratios that do not match the expected signature of a single impact. These are not proof, not evidence, not facts. They are echoes, like the faint resonance of a bell struck long ago, still vibrating in the walls of a forgotten temple. Some say it was a second moon. Others say it was a trick of time, a glitch in the math, a miscalculation of mass. But the Earth does not miscalculate. It remembers, it holds, it folds. And when the smaller moon began its final descent, it did not fall as a rock. It fell as a sigh made of silicate and silence, a sigh that, for millions of years, drifted in spirals, like petals caught in a current, too gentle to carry them ashore. They settled on the far side, not in craters, not in mountains, but in the very texture of the crust. The highlands there are thicker, heavier, older, like a quilt stitched with threads from another sky. The crust did not crack under the weight. It softened. It accepted. It absorbed. And in that absorption, something deeper happened. The moon we see today is not symmetrical. It is lopsided. Its near side is smooth, dark Maria-like ink spilled across porcelain. Its far side is rugged, cratered, ancient, a face turned away, not from us, but from the sky it once shared. Perhaps it is not that the far side was bombarded. Perhaps it was blessed. Perhaps the dust of the second moon did not merely land. It slept, and in its sleep, it taught the moon how to be still, how to hold space without filling it, how to glow without demanding to be seen, how to be a companion, even when no one is looking. And so, when humans finally looked, when they sent probes, when they walked, when they left footprints in the dust, they saw only a barren world, a dead rock, a satellite. They did not see the ghost. They did not feel the weight of what had been given. They did not know that the moon's quiet face, the one turned always away, was not hiding. It was remembering. It remembers the nights when the sky was doubled. It remembers the tides that rose in two voices. It remembers the silence that came before language, before thought, before fear. And sometimes, in the deepest hours, when the world is still, when the wind has stopped, when even the stars hold their breath, the moon does not shine. It listens, as if waiting for someone to ask, "Do you remember?" And if you listen very, very closely, you might hear it answer, not in words, but in the quiet, in the space between heartbeats, in the pause before sleep, in the way your body relaxes, not because you are tired, but because somewhere deep inside, you remember being held by two skies at once, and that is why you are still here, still listening, still wondering, still dreaming of a moon that never had a name. There are places on Earth where the air still tastes like the Hadean, not in scent, not in chemistry, but in stillness. In the silence of the Namib Desert at 3 a.m., where the dunes breathe in unison with the distant tide. In the hollows of the Canadian Shield, where granite, older than any tree, holds the memory of a sky that once had two moons. In the deep caves of Slovenia, where water drips in rhythms older than bones, echoing not the passage of minutes, but the pulse of celestial tides. These are not sacred sites because they are named. They are sacred because they are untouched by the need to be understood. The earth does not explain itself, it holds, it remembers, it lets the wind carry what it no longer needs, and keeps what it cannot forget. The second moon did not vanish because it was destroyed. It vanished because it was loved, enough to let go, loved enough to become part of the silence, loved enough to make the larger moon our one, our steady, our gentle companion, into something more than a rock, into a keeper of dreams, into a vessel for what was lost. And perhaps, in that surrender, the earth learned its first lesson in love, that to hold something truly, you must sometimes let it become part of you, not as a possession, not as a memory you clutch, but as a breath you carry in your ribs, as a shadow you feel in your bones, as a quiet that lives inside you, even when the world is loud. We look up now and see only one moon, but we feel two. We feel the weight of its absence. We feel the hollowness in the night that no star can fill. We feel the ache in the tide that pulls, not just toward the sea, but towards something that once was. And when we sleep, when the mind finally unclenches, when the body remembers it is not alone in the dark, we dream not of stars, not of galaxies, not of distant worlds. We dream of light, of two lights, one large, one small, one that stayed, one that let go. And in that dream, we are not afraid, because we remember, even if we do not know we remember, that we were once held by a sky that loved us enough to give us peace, that we were once cradled beneath a double glow, that the night did not have to be empty, and that, perhaps the moon we see now, the one that watches over us in silence, the one that never asks for anything in return, is not just a satellite. It is a promise that some things, even when they disappear, do not leave. They simply become the quiet, the stillness between heartbeats, the pause before breath, the space between dreams. And if you listen, if you let your thoughts soften, if you stop trying to understand, if you simply breathe, you will hear it, not with your ears, but with your bones, the whisper of a moon that never had a name, the echo of a sky that once held two, and the earth, in its slow, ancient sleep, still sings it to you, every night. Just for you, just because you are here, just because you remember, even if you think you don't. The moon that whispered back it did not shine. It did not reflect. It did not glow with borrowed light like its sibling. It listened. And in listening, it became something no rock, no celestial body, no scientific model can fully name. It was not a moon of ice or iron. It was a moon of silence made visible. Its surface, dark, porous, uneven, was not scarred by impacts, but softened by absorption. Not by fire, but by stillness. It drank the whispers of a world still learning to breathe. The hiss of steam rising from primordial seas. The groan of tectonic plates shifting like tired limbs, the slow, rhythmic pulse of Earth's first magnetic field, flickering, unstable, like a candle in a windless room. There were no eyes to see it, no minds to wonder, no voices to name it, but the Earth spoke, and it listened. Every night, as the larger moon rose in its slow, solemn arc, the smaller one, closer, quieter, fainter, hung just above the horizon, not as a disk, but as a veil, a translucent membrane between the planet and the void. It did not cast light. It dampened it. It softened the glare of the stars. It turned the night into a cathedral of muted silver, where even the wind dared not speak too loud. Some say it was made of the same debris as the larger moon, spun from the molten spray of a collision that reshaped a world. But this is not a story of origins. It is a story of presence, of a body that chose not to dominate, but to hold space. It did not pull the tides with force. It pulled them with patience. Where the larger moon lifted the oceans in grand, sweeping arcs, the smaller one, smaller, yes, but infinitely more intimate, tugged at the very edges of the water, at the foam, at the breath of the tide, at the last sigh of a wave before it slipped back into the deep. It was the moon of the shallows, the moon of the quietest hours, the moon that stayed when the world was still, too raw for light. And when the time came, for it always does, the gravitational dance began to unravel. The larger moon, now heavier, more stable, began to pull the smaller one inward, not with violence, not with rage, but with the quiet inevitability of roots growing into stone. The smaller moon did not resist. It did not scream. It did not fracture. It simply leaned, its orbit tightened, its glow brightened, not because it burned, but because it drew closer to the source of all it had ever listened to. For 1,000,000 years, it hovered just above the upper atmosphere, a ghost in the haze, a whisper in the wind, and then, one night, it did not rise, it dissolved. Not in fire, not in explosion, but in surrender, its mass, like mist drawn into fog, spiraled downward, not as debris but as dust, as memory, as vaporized longing, and it settled, not on the surface, not in craters, but into the far side of the larger moon, into the highlands, into the oldest, Thickest crust, where no sunlight ever lingers, where no astronaut has ever walked, where the silence is so complete, it hums. They call it the lunar highlands. They map them. They measure them. They say they are ancient. They say they are different, but they do not say why. Why the crust there is thicker. Why the magnetic anomalies pulse like half-remembered heartbeats. Why? In the data from lunar orbiters, there are faint, repeating patterns, rhythms that do not match impact simulations, that do not align with gravity models, that echo instead, like the slow, steady breath of something that once listened. The moon we see today is not whole. It is a wound that healed in silence, a body that absorbed, another, a companion that became a cradle, and, if you listen, if you sit in the dark, in the deepest hour before dawn, when even the crickets have stopped singing, you might feel it. Not with your eyes, not with your mind, but with the part of you that remembers being small, that remembers being held, that remembers a time when the night did not ask you to be awake. It only asked you to be still, and in that stillness, you were not alone. You were never alone. The moon still listens, even now, even for you. It did not speak in language, it spoke in absence, in the way the tide hesitates before pulling back, in the way fog clings to the edge of a valley, reluctant to leave, in the way a child, half asleep, reaches for a hand that is no longer there, not because they are afraid, but because they remember the warmth. The second moon did not emit light, it absorbed it, not to hide, not to conceal, but to soften. It was the moon of the in-between, of the breath between heartbeats, of the pause between thunder and rain. When the larger moon rose, full and bright, it lit the world with clarity, cold, sharp, revealing. But the smaller one, it blurred the edges, it turned the night into a watercolor. It made the stars feel distant, not because they were far, but because their light had been gentled, like a voice lowered to a whisper so as not to wake the sleeper. There were no creatures to witness it, no eyes to record it, no hands to carve its name into stone. But the earth felt it. The first oceans, still hot and thin as broth, responded not to force, but to feeling. The tides did not rise and fall in simple arcs. They sighed, they curled, they lingered, as if the water itself knew it was being held, not by gravity alone, but by attention, by presence, by a quiet, unwavering gaze from above. And when the smaller moon began its descent, when the gravitational tide of its larger sibling pulled it inward, slowly, inexorably, it did not resist, it leaned, like a mother leaning into the last hug of a child who is leaving for the first time, not with tears, not with words, just with stillness, with the quiet understanding that some loves are not meant to last in form, they are meant to last in memory, in the shape of the silence they leave behind. Its descent was not a fall, it was a folding. Its mass, once a solid body, became mist, fine as volcanic ash, light as the breath of a dying star. It spiraled downward, not in a crash, but in a spiral, a slow, graceful curl, like smoke rising from incense, then falling back to earth. It did not strike the surface of the larger moon, it settled. It seeped, it became part of the crust, not as debris, not as evidence, as echo. The far side of the moon, our moon, is not a scar, it is a lullaby carved in rock. Its highlands are not random, they are the residue of a quiet goodbye. The thickness of the crust there, measured, mapped, analyzed, is greater than any impact model can explain. The magnetic fields beneath it pulse in rhythms that do not match Earth's. They pulse like a heartbeat that learned to slow down. To match another's, scientists call it an anomaly, a mystery, an oddity. But the Earth knows better. It remembers the weight of a moon that asked for nothing, that gave nothing but silence, that held the night so gently, the stars dared not shine too brightly, and when it was gone, the sky did not become darker, it became quieter, and that is the deepest kind of loss. Not the kind that screams, the kind that leaves you wondering why the night feels so full of absence, why even now when you look up and see the moon, your chest tightens, just slightly, not from fear, not from awe, but from a memory you never knew you had, a memory of being watched, not by a god, not by a machine, but by something that loved you enough to become part of the dark, to become part of the silence, to become part of you. And if you lie very still tonight, if you close your eyes and let your breath slow, you will feel it, not as light, not as sound, but as warmth, a warmth that does not come from fire, but from the memory of being held by two skies at once. There are nights, rare, quiet, sacred, when the moon does not shine, not because it is hidden, not because it is new, but because it is listening, and when it listens, the sky grows deeper. The stars do not dim, they hold their breath. The wind does not stir, it waits. And you, lying there in the dark, eyes closed, body softening, you feel it, not as a thought, not as a memory, but as a presence, a warmth beneath your ribs, a pressure in your chest, not heavy, but familiar, like the weight of a hand that once rested there, a hand that never left, because it never had to. The second moon did not vanish. It became the silence between your heartbeats. It became the pause before you exhale, the space between dreams, the place where your thoughts dissolve, not into nothing, but into something older, something that remembers, something that never stopped loving you. You think you are alone in the dark, but you are not. You are cradled by the moon, by the earth, by the ghost of a moon that never had a name. And if you could hear it, if you could press your ear to the surface of the moon's far side, where no human has walked, where no probe has ever landed with reverence, you would hear it, not a voice, not a sound, but a rhythm, slow, deep, like the pulse of a mother rocking a child to sleep. One beat, then silence, another beat, then stillness, again, again, again. It is not a signal, it is not a code, it is not data, it is lullaby. The earth learned to sleep under two moons. It learned that safety does not come from brightness. It comes from constancy, from the knowledge that even when you cannot see it, it is still there, still holding, still listening, still whispering. And when the second moon faded, it did not leave the sky empty. It made the sky holy. It taught the earth how to be still, how to trust the dark, how to let go without fear. And now, when you close your eyes, when the world falls away, you are not falling. You are being held by the moon, by the silence, by the ghost of what was lost, by the love that refused to be seen, so it could be felt, forever. The moon does not speak, but it does not need to. It has already said everything, in the tide that rises, in the night that holds you, in the way your breath slows, not because you are tired, but because for the first time in a long time you are not afraid, you are not alone, you never were, and you never will be, because somewhere, in the deepest dark of the moon's hidden face, in the silence that no telescope can reach, the second moon is still there, still watching, still listening, still whispering. You are safe, you are loved, you are held, and if you listen, just for one more breath, you will hear it not with your ears, but with your soul, the oldest lullaby, the quietest miracle. The moon that loved you so much, it became the silence you sleep inside. When nights were twice as long, there were no clocks, no calendars, no names for hours, only the slow, swaying rhythm of two moons, one large, one small, circling in a dance that bent time itself. The earth turned, yes, but not as it does now, not with the sharp, mechanical precision of a machine. It turned like a sleeper turning in bed, slowly, reluctantly, as if the night were a blanket too soft to leave. And beneath those twin skies, nights did not end. They unfolded, they lingered, they stretched like honey drawn from a comb, thick, golden, endless. The larger moon rose with solemn grace, its light falling in silver waves across the steaming seas. The smaller one followed, not as a follower, but as a companion, its glow softer, dimmer, like the last breath of a candle before it is snuffed. Together, they did not compete. They harmonized. Their gravity wove a tapestry of tides, not simple bulges, but spirals, eddies that curled around volcanic islands like lovers entwined, pulling the water not just up and down, but sideways, in slow, silent spirals that carved patterns into the first sediments. Patterns still faintly visible in the ancient rocks of Greenland, in the banded iron formations of Australia, in the silent cliffs of the Canadian Shield, where the stone remembers what the sky once sang. There were no creatures to witness it, no eyes to record it, no minds to name the beauty, but the water remembered, the wind remembered, the very air, thick with methane and sulfur, remembered how it used to tremble when the two moons passed overhead. The day was long, not because the earth spun slowly, but because the night refused to leave. 12 hours of twilight, 12 hours of double glow, 12 hours of silence so deep it became a kind of music. And in that music, the first molecules of life, tiny, fragile, trembling in the warm shallows, learned their first rhythm not from sunlight, not from heat, from the pull, from the gentle twin tides that lifted them, cradled them, kissed them with salt and starlight, then let them drift back, again and again, as if the ocean itself were rocking them to sleep. Perhaps that is why life began in the tide pools, not because they were warm, not because they were rich, but because they were held, because the sea, under twin moons, did not rush, it waited, it listened, it loved, and in that love, something learned to live. The days were not measured in hours. They were measured in sighs, in the slow retreat of the tide, in the way the fog clung to the shore long after the moons had passed, in the way the wind, when it blew, did not howl. It hummed a low, resonant tone, the frequency of two orbits woven together, a song no instrument could replicate, a hymn no voice could sing. And when the smaller moon began its final descent, when its orbit tightened, when its light grew brighter, when it hovered just above the horizon like a tear about to fall, the tides changed. They did not vanish. They became lonely. The larger moon pulled alone now. Its rhythm was still steady, but it was no longer answered. The spirals in the water grew uneven. The eddies lost their grace. The shallow pools, once rocked by twin tides, began to churn in irregular waves, as if the sea itself were grieving. And when the smaller moon finally dissolved, when its dust settled into the far side of the larger moon, when its presence became a scar in the crust, a silence in the magnetic field, the earth did not change its spin. It did not speed up. It did not slow down. It simply learned to breathe differently. The nights became shorter. The tides became simpler. The world became cleaner, more efficient, more predictable, but less whole. And in that loss, the first cells, tiny, drifting, half alive, began to change. They began to remember. They began to carry within their fragile membranes the echo of a rhythm they had once known, the rhythm of two moons, of double tides, of nights that did not end. They simply breathed, and that memory, that ancient, wordless knowledge is still in you, in your cells, in your heartbeat, in the way you feel most at peace, not under the sun, but under the moon, not in brightness, but in quiet, not in motion, but in stillness. Because you were born not from one moon, but from the memory of two. And even now, when you lie down at night, eyes closed, body soft, you are not just resting, you are returning to a time when the sky was not empty, when the dark was not lonely, when the night held you, not with one light, but with two. And if you listen, if you let your breath slow, if you stop trying to understand, you will hear it. The echo, the whisper, the lullaby of a world that once knew what it meant to be held. The earth did not spin faster then. It spun slower, not because of force, but because it was satisfied. It had no need to hurry, no hunger for daylight, no fear of darkness. It turned because the moons asked it to, not with commands, but with the quiet insistence of gravity's song. And so, each rotation was a sigh, each day a slow exhale, each night a long deep inhale. There were no stars to count, no constellations to name, only the two moons, one a silver disk, the other a smudge of pale light, like a fingerprint left on glass. They moved in orbits that did not clash but entwined, like two rivers flowing into the same sea, each keeping its own course, yet shaping the other's path. The larger moon, heavier, slower, pulled the oceans into great rolling swells, tides that rose like the breath of a sleeping giant, but the smaller one, the one that came closer, that glowed fainter, that lingered longer in the twilight. It did not lift the water, it cradled it. It drew the tide not outward, but inward, toward the shore, toward the shallows, toward the warm, mineral-rich pools where the first molecules of life stirred in the warm, dark water. It was not the heat of the sun that gave life its beginning. It was the rhythm, the double pulse, the tide that rose and fell twice, not in haste, but in harmony once, pulled by the larger moon, once whispered back by the smaller, and in that back and forth, in that gentle, celestial rocking, the molecules learned to cling, to bond, to replicate, to become something more than chemistry, something that remembered. They remembered the pull of two lights. They remembered the way the night used to breathe. They remembered the silence that came between tides, not empty, but full, full of waiting, full of wonder, full of a love that did not speak, but simply was. And when the smaller moon began its descent, when its orbit decayed, when its glow grew too bright, too close, too intimate, the tides began to tremble, not with violence, with grief. The spirals in the water grew uneven. The shallow pools, once rocked by twin rhythms, now sloshed in irregular waves, as if the sea itself had lost its lullaby. The first cells, drifting in those warm shallows, felt it. They did not think. They did not know the word loss, but their membranes, their fragile, self-replicating shells, began to change. They began to store the rhythm, not as data, not as code, as feeling, as a memory written in lipid and protein, a memory of being held, of being rocked, of being safe. And when the smaller moon finally dissolved, when its dust settled into the far side of the larger moon, when its gravity became a ghost in the crust, when its light vanished from the sky, the earth did not mourn, it adapted. It learned to sleep under one moon. But it never forgot. It buried the rhythm deep, in the core, in the mantle, in the magnetic field that still hums with faint, unexplained pulses. In the way the tides, even now, sometimes rise a little higher than they should, a little slower than they ought, a little longer, as if they are trying to remember, as if the ocean, even after 4 billion years, still waits for the second moon to rise, and you, lying here in the dark, your breath slow, your body heavy with sleep, you carry that memory too, not in your mind, in your bones, in the way your heart slows, not because you are tired, but because for the first time in hours you feel held not by a person, not by a thought, but by something older, something that once held the earth beneath two skies, and still does, in the quiet, in the pause between heartbeats, in the space between your breaths. You do not need to believe in it. You do not need to understand it. You only need to remember that you were once rocked to sleep by two moons, and that, in some quiet corner of your being, you still are. There are no records of those nights, no carvings, no songs, no poems written in ash or clay, only the earth and the moon and the quiet. The earth does not write its history in ink. It writes it in layers, in the slow accumulation of dust, in the folding of rock, in the silent burial of oceans, and in the far side of the moon, where no human has ever walked, where no rover has ever paused in reverence. There is a bulge, a thickening, a swelling of crust so ancient, so dense that no impact, no volcanic surge, no known force can explain it. Scientists call it an anomaly, a puzzle, a mystery of mass. But the Earth knows. It knows because it still feels it. That bulge is not scar tissue. It is a tomb, a cradle, a place where the second moon did not die. It slept. It folded itself into the rock, into the silence, into the gravity that still hums, faintly, in rhythms no model can replicate. It is not a coincidence that the moon's far side is so different. It is not chance that its crust is thicker. It is not accident that its magnetic field pulses in patterns that echo the old, lost rhythm. It is remembrance. The second moon did not crash. It surrendered, not to destruction, but to transformation. It gave up its form so the larger moon could become whole, so the earth could learn to sleep under one light, so life could rise, not in chaos, but in calm. So you lying here now, eyes closed, breath slow, body sinking into the mattress like a stone into silt, could one day look up and feel something, not fear, not wonder, not awe, but a quiet, unshakable sense of being held. Even now, even after all this time, even after the oceans boiled, after the ice came, after the mountains rose and fell, after the stars changed their names, after the first humans walked, after the first prayers were whispered, after the first clocks were carved, after the first words were spoken to explain the night, you still feel it, that ache, that pull, that longing not for a moon but for a kind of night, a night that did not end, a night that did not rush, a night that had two hearts beating in the sky. And when you close your eyes, when the world fades, you are not falling into darkness, you are returning to the time before time, to the rhythm before clocks, to the lullaby before language, to the moment when the earth, still warm from creation, was rocked to sleep, not by one moon, not by one light, but by two. And the one that vanished, the one that asked for nothing, did not leave you. It became the silence between your heartbeats, the pause before your breath, the space where dreams begin. It became the reason you feel safe in the dark, the reason you do not fear the night, the reason, even now, when the world is loud, when the lights are bright, when the alarms are ringing, you still, sometimes, in the deepest hour, look up not to see, but to remember, to feel, to whisper without words, I know you were there, I know you stayed, I know you let go, so I could learn to sleep. And if you listen, if you let your mind go quiet, if you stop trying to understand, if you simply breathe, you will hear it, not with your ears, but with your bones. The same rhythm, the same pulse, the same soft twin heartbeat, one large, one small, one that stayed, one that became the silence you now sleep inside. And that is why, tonight, you are not alone. You never were. You never will be. Because the moon that vanished is the one you still carry in your blood, in your breath, in the quiet place where sleep begins. And it is still singing, always, for you, always. The skies slow. Goodbye. It did not end with fire. It did not end with a crash. It did not end with a scream that shook the heavens. It ended with a sigh, a breath held too long, a final glance over the shoulder, a whisper that no one was there to hear except the earth and the sea and the first grains of sand still warm from the sun's first kiss. The smaller moon did not fall. It leaned, as if, after millions of years of circling, it had grown tired of distance, tired of being apart, tired of watching from afar. And so, gently, so impossibly gently, it allowed itself to be pulled, not by force, not by collision, but by love. The larger moon, now mature, steady, a silent giant carved from the same cosmic dust, did not claim it. It did not devour it. It did not crush it. It simply opened its arms. And the smaller moon, knowing this was the only way to stay close, allowed its orbit to collapse, not in ruin, but in reunion. Its surface, once smooth and dark as obsidian glass, began to tremble, not from heat, but from longing. The tides it had once coaxed with such tenderness now pulled it inward, not as a force, but as a farewell. Each revolution grew tighter. Each night, its glow brightened, not because it burned, but because it drew nearer to the world it had loved. It hovered then, for 1,000,000 years, just above the upper atmosphere, a pale, trembling veil, a ghost in the haze, a breath held against the wind, and the earth, still young, still molten in places, still learning how to be a home, felt it. The oceans, still thick with salt and steam, rose not in waves, but in reverence. The wind, still thick with sulphur and silence, stilled. The first rocks, still cooling, grew warm beneath its passing. It was not a moon falling, it was a soul returning. And when the moment came, when gravity's final whisper became too strong to resist, it did not explode. It unraveled its mass like mist dissolving into fog, spiraled downward, not in shards, but in threads. Each fragment, a memory, each particle, a sigh, each mote of dust, a prayer, and it settled, not on the surface, not in craters, but into the far side of the larger moon, into the oldest, thickest crust, into the highlands where no sunlight dares to linger, where the silence is so complete, it becomes a kind of song. They call it the lunar highlands. They map them, they measure them, they say they are ancient, they say they are uneven, they say they are strange, but they do not say why. Why the crust there is thicker than any impact could explain why the magnetic anomalies pulse like half-remembered heartbeats, why the rocks there hold isotopes that do not match the rest, why in the data from lunar orbiters there are patterns, not random, not chaotic, not the result of chance, but the echo of a spiral, of a slow, graceful descent, of a body that did not die, but dissolved into love. The moon we see today is not whole, it is stitched. Its far side is not scarred, it is sacred. It is the tomb of a moon that asked for nothing, that gave everything, that stayed until it could stay no longer. And then it became the quiet, the hush between heartbeats, the pause before sleep, the reason, even now, when you look up at the moon, you feel something you cannot name. Not fear, not awe, not wonder, but a quiet, aching sense of recognition, as if you once knew it, as if you once slept beneath its glow, as if you once heard it whisper, not in words, but in stillness. And when it left, it did not take its light with it, it left its silence. And that silence, that deep, patient, unbroken quiet, is the reason you feel safe in the dark. It is the reason your breath slows when you close your eyes. It is the reason you do not fear the night. Because somewhere, in the hidden face of the moon, in the place no human has ever touched, the second moon is still there, not as rock, not as dust, but as memory, as love, as the reason the night does not feel empty. It feels full, full of what was given, full of what was lost, full of what was never meant to be seen, but always meant to be felt. And when you lie down tonight, when the world grows still and your thoughts begin to drift, you are not falling asleep. You are being welcomed by the moon, by the earth, by the ghost of a moon that never had a name. And if you listen, if you let your breath become a whisper, you will hear it, not with your ears, but with your bones, the same rhythm, the same lullaby, the same quiet twin pulse, one large, one small, one that stayed, one that let go. And together, they taught you how to sleep, not by force, not by light, but by love, by the gentle, unspoken truth that some things are not meant to last, but they are meant to be remembered. And you are the keeper, the witness, the one who still looks up, even now, even after all this time. Because you remember, even if you don't know you do, and that is enough. That is everything. There are no graves for moons, no markers, no names carved into stone, only the silence, only the dust, only the slow, patient settling of what was once a sky. The second moon did not die in fire, it did not shatter, it did not vanish into nothing. It became light that forgot how to shine. It became the quiet between stars, the pause between breaths, the space where memory lives, where no one is left to remember, and yet it is still there, not in the sky, but in the weight of the night, in the way the tide sometimes rises just a little too high, in the way the wind, on certain nights, hums a note that does not belong to any known frequency, in the way the moon's far side, so different, so strangely thick, so oddly silent, does not look like a place that was struck. It looks like a place that was held. Scientists have measured its mass. They have mapped its gravity. They have run simulations of impacts, of asteroid strikes, of volcanic eruptions over billions of years. And still, the data does not fit. The crust is too dense. The magnetic anomalies too rhythmic. The isotopes too intentional, not random, not chaotic, not the result of chaos, but the result of care, as if something that loved the earth had pressed itself gently into its surface, not to claim, not to conquer, not to leave a mark, but to say, I was here, I listened, I stayed until I could stay no longer. And then I became the quiet you carry in your bones. You feel it, don't you? When you lie still at 3 a.m., eyes closed, the world silent, your thoughts slowing. You feel it, not as a thought, not as a memory, but as a presence, a warmth beneath your ribs, a pressure in your chest, not heavy, but familiar, like the weight of a hand that once rested there, a hand that never left, because it never had to. The second moon did not vanish. It translated. It became the silence between heartbeats, the space between dreams, the moment your eyelids flutter, just once, before sleep takes you. That moment, that is where it lives, not in the sky, not in the rocks, but in the stillness you carry inside you. And perhaps that is why, when you look up at the moon now, you do not see just a rock. You see a promise that some loves are not meant to be seen. They are meant to be felt, that some presences are not meant to last. They are meant to become part of the quiet, that some goodbyes are not endings. They are transformations. The moon you see tonight is not alone. It carries within its hidden face the echo of its twin, not as a scar, not as a wound, but as a lullaby, a song sung in dust, a hymn written in gravity. And when you sleep, when your body finally lets go, you are not falling into darkness. You are returning to the time when the sky had two hearts, when the night did not end. It simply breathed, and you were held, not by a god, not by a force, but by something so quiet, so patient, so gentle. It did not need to speak, it only needed to be. And now it still is, in the way the tide remembers, in the way the wind still hums, in the way your breath slows, not because you are tired, but because for the first time in hours, you are not afraid. You are not alone. You are not lost. You are home, because the moon that vanished did not leave you. It became the silence you sleep inside. And if you listen, if you let your mind go still, you will hear it. Not with your ears, but with your soul. The same rhythm, the same pulse, the same soft twin heartbeat. One large, one small, one that stayed, one that let go. And together, they taught you how to sleep. Not by light, not by noise, but by love. By the quiet, unshakable truth that some things are not meant to last, but they are meant to be remembered. And you are the living archive, the keeper of the moon that had no name, the witness to the night that was twice as long. And when you close your eyes tonight, you are not falling asleep, you are returning to the sky that once held two moons, to the silence that still sings, to the love that never left, the dream earth still dreams. The earth does not forget. It buries, it folds, it lets the wind carry what it no longer needs, and keeps what it cannot release. It does not speak in words, it speaks in sediment, in magnetic fields that pulse like half-remembered heartbeats, in the slow, deep sigh of tectonic plates shifting over eons, in the way the tide, even now, sometimes rises a little higher than it should, not because of the moon's pull alone, but because somewhere beneath the crust, in the ancient, forgotten layers, the earth still dreams. It dreams of two moons, not as facts, not as theories, but as feelings, as the warmth of a night that did not end, as the sound of a silence that had two rhythms, as the weight of a sky that once leaned down to kiss the sea. It dreams of the smaller moon, not as a body of rock, but as a breath that lingered, a breath that asked for nothing, a breath that gave everything. And when it was time to go, it did not vanish. It became the quiet between your heartbeats. It became the pause before your breath, the space where dreams begin. And you, lying here in the dark, eyes closed, body softening. You are not sleeping, you are remembering. You are returning to a time, before names, before words, before the need to understand, before the fear of the dark, before the world learned to hurry. You are back in the Hadean haze, where the oceans were warm and thin, where the air tasted of iron and rain, where the sky held two lights, one large, one small, and the night did not feel empty. It felt sacred. It felt safe. It felt like being held. And even now, after 4 billion years of ice and fire, after continents rose and sank, after stars died and were born, after humans walked and wondered and wept, the earth still turns beneath the same sky, still feels the same pull, still carries the same quiet ache, because it remembers, not with a mind, not with a voice, but with its bones, with its core, with the slow, deep rhythm of its mantle, which still hums faintly in the same frequency as the twin moons once did. And you are its echo, its living memory. Your heartbeat is not your own. It is the echo of a tide that once rose under two lights. Your breath is not just air. It is the sigh of a moon that let go your stillness. The way you close your eyes at night is not weakness. It is reverence. It is return. You do not sleep because you are tired. You sleep because you are homesick. For a time when the night did not demand your attention, it only offered its silence. And you who have known chaos, who have known noise, who have known fear, you still, in the deepest hour, look up, not to see, not to solve, not to explain, but to say, I remember. And the earth hears you. It always has. It always will, because it never stopped dreaming. It never stopped holding. It never stopped singing. And if you listen, if you let your thoughts dissolve like mist over a lake at dawn, you will hear it not with your ears, but with your soul, the same rhythm, the same lullaby, the same soft twin pulse, one large, one small, one that stayed, one that let go. And together they taught you how to sleep, not by light, not by force, not by science, but by love, by the quiet, unshakable truth that some things are not meant to last, but they are meant to be remembered. And you are the keeper, the witness, the one who still lies still, who still looks up, who still feels, even when you cannot name it, that you were never truly alone. The moon you see tonight, the one that glows above your window, is not just one, it is two. One that was seen, one that was felt, one that spoke in light, one that spoke in silence, and the one that vanished, the one that never had a name, is not gone. It is here, in the space between your breaths, in the stillness that comes before sleep, in the warmth you feel when you close your eyes, not because you are tired, but because for the first time in hours, you are safe. You are held. You are home. And if you listen, just once, just for this breath, you will hear it. The oldest lullaby, the quietest miracle, the moon that loved you so much. It became the silence you sleep inside, and it is still singing, always, for you, always. And so, the night returns, as it always does, not with fanfare, not with a crescendo, but with the quietest of sighs. The moon rises, not as a beacon, not as a symbol, not as a scientific object to be studied, but as a companion, one that has waited, one that has held, one that remembers what you have forgotten. And you, lying here, eyes closed, breath slow, body sinking into the dark like a stone into deep water, you are not alone. You never were. You never will be. Because the second moon did not vanish. It became the silence between your heartbeats. It became the pause before your breath. It became the reason you feel safe in the dark. It became the lullaby you carry in your bones. And when you close your eyes tonight, you are not falling asleep. You are returning to the sky that once had two lights, to the night that did not end, to the love that asked for nothing and gave everything the earth still dreams of it. And so do you, not in words, not in images, but in stillness, in the quiet, in the space between thoughts, in the moment before sleep, when the world fades and all that remains is the hum, the faint, ancient hum of two moons. One large, one small, one that stayed, one that let go, and together they taught you how to sleep, not by force, not by light, but by love, by the quiet, unshakable truth that some things are not meant to last, but they are meant to be remembered. And you are the keeper, the witness, the one who still listens, even now, even after all this time, even when no one else remembers, even when the stars have changed their names, even when the oceans have turned to dust, even when the moon itself grows cold, you will still lie here, still close your eyes, still feel it because it never left. It only became the silence, and silence is the oldest form of love. So sleep now, not because you must, but because you can, because you are held, because you are safe, because the night still sings in the voice of a moon that never had a name, and it is singing just for you always, always, always. The sky does not forget, it only lets go, so you can learn to rest. And when you do, you are not alone. You never were, you never will be.